Some of them I don't think even realized it was a cult yet. I think some
Mm.
of them were still at the point where they were like, I kind of in that, what the hell just happened to
Yeah.
me? Because you know the feeling I'm talking about. You've
Yeah.
been there. Um, and at the beginning, you don't. I mean, I don't think I called it a cult for the first year or two I was out. I don't remember exactly when I said had this epiphany, but I remember thinking, "Oh my God, we were in a cult." And it was like this light bulb went off in my mind, and I was just like, "Holy cow, that was a cult!" Because it took me a while to get to that point because there's such a stigma attached to that term that it's a hard, and it's getting better. It's getting better because of people like you and us and other podcasts and documentaries. It's getting better that people are openly able to talk to and use that word, and it does not have the same stigma I think that it did in the 1970s, 80s, and even the 90s. It's the awareness is really spreading. I think the internet and podcast and documentaries are really helping with keeping people aware that even people that haven't been in a cult aware that they're out there and aware that it's more commonplace than I think a lot of people want to believe.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Truth That Heals podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Anthony Hernandez, and today's episode is an interview with a former cult member. Today, we're going to be talking with Melody Post. She is co-host to the podcast Cultimatum. What a badass name for a podcast! So we're going to be talking with her, and also be diving into a bit of her story as a former member of a cult. Melody, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's a little cold over here. It's about 64 degrees where I'm at. How's the weather over there in your part of the neighborhood?
Well, 64 sounds like summer weather to me right now. We woke up to -5 for the base temperature and -17 with the wind chills. So very cold where I'm at.
It's very cold. Here where I'm at, I'm in San Antonio, and people at the moment are kind of panicking. You go to the
Oh,
markets,
yes.
you go to the stores, and all the shelves are empty. And it kind of reminds me of my days in the cult, because
Oh,
in our time in the cult, we were always ready for the doomsday, for the end times. And so we were always ready. And I'm seeing all these people like
yep.
they're waiting last minute.
I can relate to that, Ryan, because I was in a doomsday cult too, and we were storing up food for the end times, for the tribulations. 3.5 years of tribulations, we were supposed to have 3.5 years of food stored up to survive on. So that's I can relate to that food hoarding. I mean that was 30 years ago. I'm pretty sure all that food is bad now.
Yes, it probably is, but I'm so excited to be having this conversation with you. And I didn't mention the name of the cult that you were in. Can you share with us what was the cult, the name of it that you were once a part of?
It was the House of Yahweh, and it's the House of Yahweh that's based out of, I think they say Abilene, Texas, but technically the building is now, or the church structure is now in Clyde, Texas, which is a very small community outside of Abilene. So the House of Yahweh was the name of it.
And were you born into this, or was it something that you joined at an older age?
I joined. Okay. I will say in 1989 is when I joined. I joined as a teenager with my family, meaning my mom, my dad, and my sister. I was only 15 when we joined, and my dad found the House of Yahweh with his cousin. They were kind of searching for the truth, the truth. And they found this booklet called The Name of the Creator, which basically said that anybody who was using the name God was basically, well, praying to the devil or Baal. And that's why your prayers weren't being answered because you weren't using the proper name for the Creator, which is Yahweh. And that's kind of what the hook that pulled my dad into it. And then he brought us all there in 1989 for the Feast of Passover was our first feast because they keep the feasts in the Old Testament of the Bible.
Okay, so already with what you're saying about kind of the background of this movement cult,
Yes.
1,000 questions are popping into my head that I can't ask all of them at once.
Yes.
Um, but so before this, was your family at all religious or church going or not at all?
I would say that my mom and dad were both raised Catholic, but they never, and they got married in a Catholic church, but they never, I was never brought to a Catholic service, and neither was my sister. So, because I have a younger sister, we did join a couple non-denominational Christian-based churches when we were younger. They didn't last very long. One was maybe for a couple years, and the other one was even maybe for a couple months. And then after that was when we found the House of Yahweh.
Okay, and was the founder, was he still alive? Was he, I mean, because like in different cults, like
Yep.
Jehovah Witnesses, the founders have already passed on. But in this case, in your case, was it still a live cult with the cult founder?
Yes, the cult leader was still alive. He's not any longer. He died in, I believe it was 2022 or 2021. Um, and but yeah, at the time that we joined, he was still alive, and I actually ended up after we arrived, I ended up marrying his son when we were still there. I was the only one in my family who actually moved down to the Abilene, Texas area and actually lived, you know, the day-to-day life. Not We weren't directly on what they would now probably call the compound. They referred to it as the 44 acres, the cult language, where they have all their own special words.
Yeah.
And they called it the 44. But now there's a lot of campers and trailers where people actually now do, a lot of the members, most of the members now live either very close to or on the compound.
Now, you said earlier that you joined around 1989 with your family. You were a teenager.
Yes.
How many years after that did you marry the son of the cult leader?
I I joined when I was 15. I was engaged to him by the time I was 16. I did not get married until I was 18, and I will give my dad and my grandfather credit for that. The reason I did not, I probably would have gotten married even younger than 18. The only reason I didn't is because my dad was insistent that I got my high school diploma before I got married. And that was because my grandfather valued education, and my dad worked for his father, my grandfather. And I think my dad knew if he didn't make sure I got my diploma, he would never hear the end of it from my grandfather. So I think that was the reason he made, and I'm grateful at this point, regardless of how it happened, because a lot of people didn't get their diplomas because they did get married so young. Because marrying young was encouraged. Getting married as a teenager was not unusual, and it was kind of the thing is that I think they wanted more members, more younger members. They wanted us to procreate and have babies. And then I did. I was pregnant by the time I was um, 19. I was pregnant by the time I was, no, I was still 18, I think, when I first got pregnant. And then I had my baby when I was 19, my first baby.
Wow. So when you joined this, were you hooked? Did you believe everything?
I did. I did. And I don't know. I suspect some of it was certainly my young age, I think um, made me probably a little bit more pliable, a little bit more easily influenced by the cult tactics. I didn't even realize it was a cult, right? I mean, nobody joins a cult. We join religious movements or, political movements or something that we think is a good cause or that is the truth. So, I did. I was all in. I believed it wholeheartedly to the point where it did caused me to have to do a lot of deconstructing after leaving because it was hard to let go of some of those ingrained beliefs that had gotten, you know, so ingrained in my brain that I had to unlearn things when I left.
So earlier you mentioned that one of like the key beliefs is that those who pray to God and using God but not the quote unquote like proper name, that they
Yes.
were in reality they were praying to Baal or some demons.
Yes.
How did that or did that in any way influence your relationships with other people?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, it did. I mean, for one thing, we were told we weren't allowed to step foot in a quote unquote church because basically you're opening yourself up to evil spirits and you're uh, basically you're sinning. You're sinning by entering a Sunday worshiping church. That Sunday worshiping churches are worshiping the sun god, and that you have to avoid that at all cost. So anything that was going on in my family that would have taken place, like a wedding or a funeral that was in a church building, we weren't allowed to attend. So, and not only that, then because of the fact that we did not celebrate traditional secular holidays, we did not celebrate Christmas, Valentine's, Easter, Thanksgiving, birthdays, all of those holidays were considered sinful. And so that also put a wedge between us and our extended family, including my grandparents that we were quite close to when we first got involved in this. So yeah, definitely put a wedge between us and our extended family members.
So we haven't spoken much about the cult leader, but who was he?
Well, his name is Israel Hawkins. He actually was at one point in his youth, he was a rockabilly singer. He was a salesman, and he was an ex-cop turned cult leader. So I think he got, I know he went to some kind of Bible college. I don't even know if he finished that or not, but he did go to some Bible college at one point. But his brother created another House of Yahweh that was in Odessa, Texas. That's why I was specific about where it was located. And his brother's name was Jacob. And between him and his brother, they claimed to be, or at least he claimed, I'm not 100% sure what his brother taught because I wasn't obviously in that organization because they were two separate organizations. But he claimed that him and his brother were the two witnesses spoken of in the Bible. So him and his brother were the ones that were supposed to preach the truth during the tribulations to try to get the world to turn from their sins. And he was very charismatic, but in a very southern hick kind of way. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. But he seemed very non-threatening. He did not come across as being a threat. So I think most people would come in and you would have a conversation with him, and he just seemed like a good old Texas boy. He didn't come across as a super authoritarian. Now, the further you got into it, the more he did assert his authority and control over the members. But it was something that when you first met him, you wouldn't think that he was that way. You didn't get that impression immediately.
Okay, so Jacob is the brother, right?
Jacob was the brother. Yep. And he was Israel.
Israel. So were they both salesmen?
I don't know a whole lot about his brother, but what I will say is he was actually born Buffalo Bill Hawkins, and that an older sibling named him because his parents had run out of names, and they let an older sibling name him, and he legally changed his name to Israel. And apparently, now I haven't even looked into this, but apparently there is some scripture in the Bible that says that one of the two witnesses will change his name to Israel. And I wonder if he read that and then used that and then purposely went and changed his name to Israel because he's like, oh, well, now I can claim that I'm in the Bible.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. I like to kind of dive into, the cult, but also the cult leaders, trying to understand a little bit of how they think. So he was a salesman. He changed his name. He
Yeah.
had some background in scriptures. But did you feel that? I mean, looking now today, hindsight, do you
Yeah.
think he actually believed it, or was it all bullshit?
Here's the thing. When I first left, I gave him the benefit of the doubt and thought, okay, maybe he really thought this stuff was true and it just kind of got out of hand or went off the rails. But now in hindsight, I'm like, I think he was a con man. And I think he knew I think it was deliberate. I think he knew he was conning people and he did it for financial gain. He did it for a power trip. He did it for, well, he married lots of young girls toward the end. But it's estimated that he had anywhere between 60 and 100 wives, not sure. And I know that some of them were underage girls. I don't know numbers or percentages of which ones were underage. So, no, I definitely think he did it for his own personal gain. And I think he knew he was conning people.
Okay, so I'm gonna say he was conning people. People aren't probably gonna agree. That's what I'm gonna say. It looks to me like he's conning people, and you have three things. You have the finances. He's making. Did he make?
Yep.
Did he make good money doing this?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, there's still court cases going on of his children trying to get his inheritance because apparently he'd written some will in by hand saying that the organization was supposed to get everything after he died, but some of his children fought that in court. So, but he has most of his money, a lot of his money was invested in real estate. And he was so sneaky and so sly and such a good con artist that most of these properties were not in his name and nor were they in the organization's name. A lot of them were in names of people in the cult members who did not realize or do not realize their names are on these properties because apparently he did something where he put them in the names of LLCs through Canada. And apparently in Canada, you can have somebody's name on an LLC and they don't have to be informed or even know that their name is on this. So I'm guessing there's members of the House of Yahweh right now that have their names on properties and they have no idea this property is in their name.
Okay, so wow, so he has financial gains. He has
Yes.
power trips, and
Yes.
then you also mentioned sex. You said he
Yes.
had six wives,
Oh, somewhere between 60 and 100 by the time he
60
died.
and a
60,
hundred.
sorry, 60 and 100. It's unknown because he that most of these ceremonies were done very secretively, and he did not announce or tell anybody. The only way I guess you were really able to tell, and some of them he would call concubines rather than wives, which is basically a sex slave, which I think the main difference is maybe he had no financial obligation to the concubines. I'm not 100% sure the difference, but um, basically the people that because I left before he started marrying this many wives. When I left, he only had two. So he basically all of the wives would sit at the front end of the congregation, and it kind of became convoluted where his wives ended and the rest of the congregation began. So I guess it was really hard to tell, but that was the main reason people came up with some estimated numbers of how many wives they thought he might have.
Was he a charming man or not?
Like I said, he could be charismatic in a very down to earth, southern good old boy kind of way where you didn't think he was harmful. And I guess I would say I even fell under his spell in the beginning. He actually had really good things to say about me before I married his son. Like he had called me into his office before I moved down there to marry him, and he had asked me, when you move down here, would you prefer to work in town at the office with me, or would you prefer to work out on the farm with my son? And I kind of was like feeling like, is this a test? What is he, is there some other reason he's asking me this? But I said, well, if you're giving me the choice, I guess I would prefer to work out on the farm. And then he told his son after that you could have searched the world wide and you couldn't have found yourself a more righteous wife. And I think in hindsight, looking at it, I think he thought, because his ego was so big, I think he thought everybody was trying to get close to him. And that if I was marrying his son, it was really just because I wanted to get close to him. And I think that's why he posed that question to me to see if I was really wanting to get close to him or if I really did love his son. And I guess I passed the test.
Okay, well, so I'm learning so much about this person. Um, but part of the teachings also, of course, we mentioned about the name of God, how everyone is worshiping the devil if you're not worshiping in the proper way. But also, we have mentioned it as being a doomsday end times. Can you walk us through what were the beliefs on that?
Yes. They did predict some specific dates, multiple different times. I don't think they're predicting dates anymore because he's passed away now. But every time a date wouldn't come to pass, there would be some logical, biblical, scientific explanation about calendars and dates, and we got this wrong, and we need to adjust that. And there was always some gaslighting going on as to why that didn't happen. But yes, we were expected to not only store up food and to do the work of Yahweh. And we worked because, I worked for the House of Yahweh, and we worked for way below minimum wage. My husband and I together made $120 a week, working 40 hours each. And that was a paycheck together. I used to think we both made $60 a week. I later found out from other ex-members, no, 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 no. You were making $40 and he was making $80 because you were a woman. I got paid half as much because I was a woman. I didn't realize that because it all came in one check. But um and a lot of that focus, I think in hindsight, knowing how cults work and how the cult tactics work, I think that a lot of that focus on the end times and looking for that fear tactic being used as that you're so focused on this goal that you aren't kind of really paying attention to what's going on in your peripheral vision because you're looking ahead and you're really believing that you're doing the work to get into the kingdom. So you're not really paying attention to all of the crazy shit that's going on the sidelines because you're like, well, my focus is to get into the kingdom, so I'm just going to keep my head down and focus on, the work of Yahweh and do what I have to do for my salvation. So I think that was a tactic too in hindsight. At the time, I didn't realize that that was any kind of tactic or anything like that, um but yeah, at the time that's what I believed.
Going back to what you're saying about like the income, it sounds like you're making a whopping $40 and $80 while you're
Yeah.
working hard. Now I'm trying to understand. Okay, so like the end times, was it gonna, you said it was gonna be like a 3-year process and then like the world ends, or what is the belief?
They believed that the tribulation lasted a total of 7 years. And I think that was from Revelations. I used to know all my scriptures. I don't know all my scriptures anymore. It's been a long time. But that 7 years was split into two groups. The first half of tribulations was 3.5 years. The second half of tribulations was another 3.5 years. We believed that we as the cult, as the 144,000 or the chosen people of the Bible, that we were going to have to be on the earth and suffer with the rest of humanity for the first 3.5 years of that tribulation. And after that 3.5 years, the two witnesses would be killed or die, and then all of us, along with the two witnesses, would be raised into the clouds like a rapture of sorts, and then we would be protected from the second half of tribulation.
Okay, so so upon the death of the cult leader, or yeah, upon his death, after that is when the members will be raised up, kind of raptured.
Yes, yes. When he died, then he would basically come back, be raised from the dead, him and his brother, and that we would then all be raised up into the sea of glass, the clouds, into the heavens to be protected from the last 3.5 years of tribulation. Yes.
Is the brother still alive?
No, no, he has passed now too.
Okay, how many members have been raised up?
None, zero.
None.
That I'm
Okay.
aware of. As a matter of fact, I did hear that after he died, that some of the elders for hours prayed over him, trying to bring him back to life, which also did not work.
Okay. So this is another reason why I personally think he's a con man, or was. Well,
Yeah,
because like if you have, I'm thinking, and you can also share your thoughts, but I'm thinking if someone really, really, really believes that what they have is true and that they're bringing people to Yahweh, I mean, they're doing everything the
right.
right way, I would think, wouldn't they not care so much about money? I,
Yeah, you would think.
it's going to end, right? I mean, what's the point? I mean, hey, look,
Yeah,
here's a $10,000 bonus to, I mean, there's so much money we have, right? I mean,
Yeah, he wasn't able to bring it with him.
yeah. So,
Whether he was raised into the clouds or, as of now, he's just dead and gone, and they buried him in a casket. So he wasn't able to bring that money with him.
yeah, and it's unfortunate because so many people really believe it. I mean, you
Yes.
and so many members believe it, and also with what's the point of having so many wives? The polygamy, was it? I mean, to was it to multiply? And
Um, this is what I will say. That teaching changed. That was not a polygamist group when we first joined. It was not a polygamist organization when I got married. It was when I was a few months pregnant that they started shifting and changing this teaching. And the real reason behind the polygamous teaching is that he was caught cheating on my mother-in-law with his secretary. And his response to that was, "Oh, I have not sinned. I would never sin. I have done nothing wrong and I have nothing to apologize for. This is biblical and it is a righteous thing for a man to have more than one wife. If you look in the Bible, in the Old Testament, lots of men had multiple wives, and this is a new teaching, and all men in the house of Yahweh are now going to be able to have multiple wives."
well, it's very convenient. I mean, like you're saying, I mean, but for me, it's also it is straight up an abuse of power.
Yeah,
Straight up,
absolutely.
straight up. For you as a woman, were there any, like any teachings that gave empowerment to women, or was it always like very submissive?
It was mostly very submissive to women, and I will say, it became even more oppressive after I left. When I was there, there were strict rules about dress codes with women. Like we couldn't wear, skirts, dresses, or shorts that were above our knee. Um, and it wasn't, but we didn't have to, and then it changed to where they have to wear skirts and dresses all the time. They weren't allowed to wear pants. Then they had to wear dresses and skirts that went all the way down to almost the floor, covering their ankles. They could not have their ankles showing. They couldn't have their wrists showing. They had to wear gloves. They had to wear face masks, and they basically were fully covered with the exception of their eyes, at one point. Now, I've heard that some of that, I don't know if it was before he died or after, but some of that is lifting a little bit. I don't think they have to wear the veils on their face anymore because the teachings are fluid. They change with. It used to be the opinion of the leader, and now it's a board of elders. My understanding is now being led by 12 elders. So I guess they are coming to a decision together now, which I guess is a little healthier than one charismatic leader making all the decisions.
Yeah. Uh, well, like we've spoken a bit about the cult, the leader, his passing. Then the revelations didn't happen,
Yes.
but it still goes. It continues, and you're saying that it might be just a little bit healthier compared to before. Maybe just a little bit, just a little,
Yeah,
little.
I think the teachings are shifting based on the fact that he died. I do think that is true. I think they're easing up a little bit because I do think a lot of the crazy, a lot of the really outlandish stuff came from him. And I think the reason it hadn't, I'm going to say, gone off the rails before then is because my mother-in-law was the only one with, I'm going to say, the balls to confront him. Like when he would say what she would believe were off the wall crazy stuff. Like an example would be at one point, I remember at a Sabbath dinner, we got into a conversation. He said something about, well, women shouldn't wear makeup, and basically kind of insinuating that maybe we should make that a rule at the House of Yahweh. And my mother-in-law just reached over to him on the table and kind of tapped his arm, and she called him Daddy, and she said, "No, we aren't going to do that, Daddy." And she smiled at him, and he would comply with that. I think she was the only one who could kind of get through to him, and then he would be like, "Yeah, we probably shouldn't do that," and then she would rein him in. And when she basically divorced him after this cheating came to light, he really had nobody to rein him in anymore. And then the teaching went that not only did Satan then become a woman, but she could live in a farmhouse right down the road from you, literally referring to my mother-in-law, his soon-to-be ex-wife. So, and to this day, their teaching is still that Satan is a woman.
Wow. Okay, this is some deep stuff.
Yeah, it gets weirder.
Would they consider themselves as Christian?
They did not use the term Christ, and so I don't think they would consider themselves Christian, although they did believe in the Messiah. They just referred to him as the Jewish name of Yeshua rather than Christ or Lord or Savior. I think they did use Savior and Messiah as titles, but they called him by the name of Yeshua, not Jesus.
Okay, now going to a more personal level, did you see the founder or the cult leader Israel? Did you see, or not only you, but in general, did the people see him as a savior?
That happened more after I left. I think I just kind of saw him as one of the two witnesses and our leader and somebody who was going to guide us into heaven. Um, but after I left, the teaching had come. When I was there, we were like for praying example, we were taught to pray to Yeshua to get to Yahweh. And after I left, they had to pray. Eventually, it became that women had to pray through their husbands to get to Israel, to get to Yeshua, to then get to Yahweh. So it was like this chain that, especially women, had to go through this chain of authority for the Creator to hear their prayer. So yes, by the time I had left, they were literally praying to him to get to the Messiah, to get to the Creator. So it became this thing like he was the only lifeline to the creator.
And when did you leave?
I left in 1994. I left in 1994 after, when the polygamy teaching first came out, we were giving a lot of pushback. And by we, I would say it would be my husband, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and her husband. And so the two youngest children of the leader and his wife were the ones, and their spouses were the ones that were giving a lot of pushback on this teaching. Um, and during that time, we were being watched very intently to the point where we believed that there were listening devices in our homes. Our conversations were being listened to. I think our phones were bugged. Every communication that they had the opportunity to be privy to, they were making sure they heard it. And I think it's because they knew that we were starting to quote unquote fall away. And I just couldn't and there was that time because I was so brainwashed where I would go back and forth between, well, this is my religion. And this if this do I this is teaching now, I have to accept this. And then another part of my brain would be like, I'm a really jealous person. I don't know that I can share my husband. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. And so I went through that period of time. So it took about a year after the teaching came out before we actually left. Now, ultimately, we did end up getting excommunicated because we weren't just ready to walk away. And I think the fact that we kind of had one foot in and one foot out, that Israel decided that he didn't want us there anymore because we were going to poison the minds of the other members. We were going to influence them. We were going to start creating this critical thinking chain that might lose him even more members. That's why we were eventually all served excommunication papers.
Oh, so even this was the son excommunicated?
Yes, yes. His daughter, his son, his soon to be ex-wife, and then their spouses. Yeah, five of us were all excommunicated on the same day.
Wow. So how was that for you?
Um, that was really mixed for me. I think because of my mind was so muddled and confused at that time, there was part of me that felt relieved because I thought, well, now I don't have to make the choice to leave. I don't have a choice. They're kicking me out. And I thought, well, this kind of gives me the out that I've been looking for. But then there was another part of me that was still like, gosh, does this mean that I don't have my salvation? Am I now gonna not have salvation? I'm gonna burn in hell because I'm not part of this group and I'm no longer part of this teaching. And that was a difficult thing to untangle and deconstruct. I did have a lot of what I now recognize as PTSD from that. Like the first after I moved back to Michigan with my family, the first time I had to work on a Saturday. I got a fast food job, and the first time I had to work on a Saturday, I had an all and out panic attack. I literally just sat on my mom's steps and I started crying. I couldn't breathe. I was hyperventilating because I literally believed if I worked on Saturday, I was going to burn in hell. So it was so hard for me to bring myself to do that. I quit the job. That's how bad the panic attack was. I just called them and said, I can't do this. I'm really sorry. I have to quit. So yeah, it was difficult times.
Oh, so yeah, that's a very hard. It sounds like a very hard uh, burden on the mind, to have
Yes.
this so much of this fear and but now you are speaking out. I mean, you do a
Yes.
podcast and you're really engaging and you're involved in these conversations. Now, when did this transformation take place? Because from where we're at in your timeline, you
Yeah.
just quit your job because of having to work on Saturday. What changed?
Well, I tried to get counseling. I did try to go and get some therapy. Um, there was no such thing as religious therapy. There was not a lot of information out about cults. There was nothing really, there was no online availability. This was 1994, before the internet. And I remember going to this therapist and telling him what was going on in my life. And I was also going through a divorce at the time and telling him everything. And I could tell this guy was looking at me like he looked shocked, surprised, and almost scared that I just think he had no idea how to help me. I think he wanted to help me, but I'm just like, this guy can't help me. He has no idea what I'm dealing with, what I'm going through. So honestly, my deconstruction was comprised of a lot of self-help books. I just read a lot of self-help books, and at that time there weren't a lot of cult books available. But I did manage to, like, it took me. Here's an example of some long-term deconstruction. I did not put a Christmas tree in my house for 17 years. And I did, when I did it really slow. I got this little 12-inch tree and put it on my table and said, okay, let's see what happens if I do this. And when nothing happened, I'm like, the next year, I'm like, I think I want a big tree.
Mhm.
And so it took me a long time to deconstruct some of those really ingrained teachings that I had in my head and part of that was that they would say, oh, when people leave the House of Yahweh, they go right back to celebrating all the pagan holidays and they put a tree. And I'm like, well, I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm not going to do that. Um, and and I just slowly just started letting go of a lot of that stuff that was really, I think I didn't even realize how ingrained some of that stuff was in my brain. And then in about 2009 or 10, I did start on Facebook uh, a support group just for ex-members of the House of Yahweh because I felt like, well, nobody's going to understand what I'm going through, like the other people that have been in this cult and have come out like me. So I started that support group, and there's probably 200 members in that group. And then in 2020, I kind of felt like I wasn't doing enough because there was a member that had he died of a drug overdose. It may have been suicide, but either way, I think his addiction was at least somewhat related to his cult experience. And I felt like I wasn't doing enough. And that's when I started the Cult Escape and Healing group on Facebook to reach because I started to realize by talking to people in other cults that, oh my gosh, these tactics are the same. My experience was not as unique as I thought it was. I'm like, these leaders, they all do the same thing. Like to the point where it was almost like I was like, did these guys get a freaking playbook in the mail and they're all following the same methods here because it was so similar. Like talk to somebody from Jehovah's Witness, you talk to somebody from Seventh Day Adventist, talk to somebody from some small little unnamed cult, and I'm just like, this is the same. This is the same thing I went through. It's just the name is different and the cult leader's different and the members are different, but the experience is so similar. The tactics were so similar. And so I broadened that by creating the Cult Escape and Healing group because I realized I had a lot more in common with anybody who had been in any cult than I had originally believed when I started the other support group. And then from there, I went on Andrew's podcast because he posted Anonymous Andrew, he's my co-host on Cultimatum. He posted in the Cult Escape and Healing group about looking for people that were wanting to share their cult stories. So I went on his podcast to share the cult story, and afterwards he's like, "Yeah, I have a question for you. I'm thinking about doing a spin-off podcast just about cults, and I was wondering if you would want to co-host that with me because I don't have a lot of experience with cults. I'm just kind of interested." And he got interested because of the Twin Flames universe. And and so I thought about it for a couple of days, and then I went back to him and said, "Yeah, I think I am interested in doing this with you." So, and we're going on. We just had our 100th episode drop a couple weeks ago, and we'll be 2 years running in April. So that's how that all. That's the timeline for that, and that's where I'm at with that.
Well, that's a lot of episodes. Are they
Yep.
all like interviews with people?
Not everyone is in it. There's a pilot episode. We do have one episode where we kind of explain cult tactics and cult red flags. And then there are a couple episodes because it's the culture of cult, or it's Cultimatum, the culture of cults and human trafficking. So we do have a few episodes that are human trafficking victims as well that come on, survivors that come on and share their stories as well. But it is mostly we also had one like cult expert lawyer that came on and talked about cult law. And so there's a handful, maybe probably under 10 episodes that are not directly cult interviews of cult survivors, but I would say 90% are cult survivor stories.
And before this, you said that in 2010, you started a group on Facebook for the ex-members of House of Yahweh cult, correct?
Yes.
How
Yes.
how was it for you engaging with other ex-members from the cult? And I'm asking because I remember in my experience of talking to other ex-members in from the cult that I was in, it was at first very uh, polarizing. Like everyone would just go the other direction and they wouldn't want to talk about it.
Mm.
But then I started the podcast, and the way I started the podcast was more of a just me. I'm just kind of like blogging, just sharing my stories. And honestly, I was like, fuck it. People don't want to listen. They don't want to have these conversations. Well, all right, whatever. I'm going to do my own podcast. And if they don't
Mm.
want to listen, not my problem. But if they want to
Yeah.
listen, they can have this conversation. So what I'm trying to get to was people didn't want to have these conversations, but because of the podcast and me not really caring, it really kind of pushed people to start having these difficult conversations.
Yeah.
But in your case, were the people like the ex-members, were they all ready to have these conversations, or were they still like defending the cult?
I would say most of them were not defensive of the cult. But a lot of them had still a lot of guilt and shame and fear attached to their experience to where they weren't comfortable speaking openly, certainly speaking openly about it. I had a lot of private conversations with other ex-members where they would share their experiences and their trauma. But I think that a lot of the people I was interacting with were pretty early on in their deconstruction. Some of them I don't think even realized it was a cult yet. I think some
Mm.
of them were still at the point where they were like, I kind of in that, what the hell just happened to
Yeah.
me? Because you know the feeling I'm talking about. You've
Yeah.
been there. Um, and at the beginning, you don't. I mean, I don't think I called it a cult for the first year or two I was out. I don't remember exactly when I said had this epiphany, but I remember thinking, "Oh my God, we were in a cult." And it was like this light bulb went off in my mind, and I was just like, "Holy cow, that was a cult!" Because it took me a while to get to that point because there's such a stigma attached to that term that it's a hard, and it's getting better. It's getting better because of people like you and us and other podcasts and documentaries. It's getting better that people are openly able to talk to and use that word, and it does not have the same stigma I think that it did in the 1970s, 80s, and even the 90s. It's the awareness is really spreading. I think the internet and podcast and documentaries are really helping with keeping people aware that even people that haven't been in a cult aware that they're out there and aware that it's more commonplace than I think a lot of people want to believe.
And it's funny you mentioned that because like yeah, there's a stigma, and it's funny because I remember inside the cult that I was in, they were joking about it. They were saying, "Can you believe this? People think that we're a cult. Like,
Yeah,
come on, we're not crazy." And in the back of my head, I was thinking, "Well, shoot, are we a cult? Like, what is it? Like, even the definition, I wasn't actually totally sure." Uh,
right.
but because of podcasts and like you were saying, like documentaries and other resources, it's not as embarrassing, or there doesn't have to be so much shame or guilt
Yeah.
attached to it. And yeah, you have a podcast. Where can people listen to it?
It's called Cultimatum Podcast, and it's available on Apple, Spotify, and pretty much anywhere else you can find podcasts out there. My co-host is Anonymous Andrew, and he does all the audio part of it. I do a lot of the other background stuff. So, but we make a really good team. And Andrew is not a cult survivor, so we have a little dynamic there where his questions sometimes come from a little bit of left field for cult survivors, but he's asking questions from the other side of the spectrum for listeners who may not have any idea what it's like to be in a cult. And he asks, and so sometimes Andrew and I banter back and forth between, like, because he'll say things like, well, I just don't understand if somebody's predicting the world 3 times and it doesn't happen, why do you stay? And I'm like, Andrew, you believe the gaslighting.
Mhm.
It's a lot like being in a bad relationship and you're in an unhealthy relationship and you know you should get out, but you love the person and you believe them when they gaslight you. I said it's hard to understand the mentality unless you're in it. It's hard to understand how you justify the unjustifiable unless you've been in that position. But you do that when you're in a cult. You justify the unjustifiable or you make excuses for them. You're just like, well, this has to be a mistake or that must have just maybe they didn't realize this or that.
And did I know you're very busy. You have the podcast, you have the Facebook groups. Is there a chance of a book?
I have thought about a book. I have not gotten, and I did really good in English. I am a pretty good writer. I just have not taken that leap yet. Um, but it's something that's always been in the back of my mind, and I think it's something I may consider doing in the future. Especially, I think now that I think uh, Chat GPT and AI could really help with that because I think the idea at one time was just so overwhelming to me. Like, where would I even start? That I just kind of like, whoa, that seems like a lot. But now I think, and I think that the further along I get in my deconstruction, the more like I feel that I could write it from a hindsight perspective that would make a lot more sense.
Well, hey, thank you so much, Melody, for sharing about the cult that you were in, as well as your deconstruction, and now how you're helping so many people with the podcast. Again, to the audience, go check it out, Cultimatum. But before we conclude this episode, I have a question that I ask all of my guests, and that is, Melody, what is your truth that heals?
My truth that heals, I would say, is creating awareness and creating space and a platform for others. I feel like, and I'm sure you are going to be able to relate to this, Ryan, is that every time I have a guest on and provide that platform for somebody else to speak their truth and to tell their story, it helps me with my healing. It helps me. That is my healing process. This is my deconstruction. And I think that providing that really helps me to feel like I'm doing so, like I'm not just a victim, like I'm now an advocate and I'm helping other people and I'm creating this awareness. And if my story can stop one person from joining a cult or help one person get out, I will tell it 100 times.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. Um, all that you've shared today and for sharing your truth that heals. And now to the audience, please go check out the Cultimatum podcast. Go ahead and subscribe, follow, and please leave them a good rating as well. And also for my podcast, please follow me on Apple or on Spotify, the Truth That Heals podcast. Leave a rating, hopefully 5 stars. And also on YouTube, if you're watching this over there, please follow and leave a comment. Please feel free to leave comments, subscribe, and if you'd like to help me in other ways, you may do so by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/truth7. all your help really helps me to keep this podcast going. And the caffeine, I love coffee. It helps me to keep going. So please feel free to help out if you like. And again, to our guest, Melody, thank you so much for being an amazing guest on the Truth Heals podcast.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It was great to meet you. And just for all of you out there too, Ryan is going to be on Cultimatum soon too. So you'll be able to hear more of his story on our podcast. So we're kind of going to come on each other's podcast. It works well.
All right, y'all. So stay tuned.
Yes.